What is up, everybody? It is Dives, Mr. Crockpot on Twitter. This is the Blue Root Pod. The Blue Root Pod can be found on iTunes and Spotify. Please be sure to drop those 5 stars and leave a review. The Blue Root Pod can also be found on our TPL YouTube channel. We are getting close to 1,000 subscribers. If you're watching right now, be sure to hit like and subscribe below. And thank you. We love you to all of our new subscribers. All right, on tap for today, we are going to get fired up. Please welcome to the show, Tyson Quibell. Tyson is our resident Flyers analyst here at the Painted Lines. If you don't already, be sure to follow him on Twitter at Quibell Tyson. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It is fall. It is like mid-40s out right now. I got some chicken in the crock pot for some chicken corn soup later. It's good, man. Life is good, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. This fall food is the best too. So I'm excited for you.
Love it. That's actually where the crock pot from Mr. Crockpot comes from. I'm a big crock pot guy. So come fall, this is my season, man. And let's talk about the Flyers season. And more specifically, let's talk about your most recent post that can be found on thepaintedlines.com, where you compare the current Flyers team to a Charles Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities. What's going on with that, man?
Man, well, I think that classic line at the beginning with "it was the best of times, it was the worst of times." I couldn't think of a better phrase to summarize the Flyers season so far. So, you had your 2 games at the beginning, the first one starting in Europe and then coming back to North America, and the Flyers going 2-0 and looking dominant. And then the next 3, they just did not look so dominant. And then what do you know? These last 2 games since then, they beat Vegas, who many have as a Stanley Cup finalist, and then they beat the Blackhawks last night on the road again. So you're like, okay, so you're 4-3 and 1, and it's kind of this back and forth, and so it just begs the question, which is what I was asking, like, what team are the Flyers? Are they the ones that have won the 2 at the beginning and these last 2 here? Are they the 3 in the middle? Are they somewhere in between? Who are they?
Absolutely. You look at the, kind of the stats, and it looks like they're struggling offensively. But let's talk about Alain Vigneault, first-year head coach with the Philadelphia Flyers. What's your take on him, and have you seen any differences with the rotations and that? Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so with Vigneault, he always, and I think I've mentioned this before, but he always gets the most out of teams in his first year. That tends to be the case. So I was a little bit surprised that there was that 3-game skid there. Granted, they did just come back from Europe, so I think there was some fatigue involved there and not really having been at home much at all in the midst of the process. But what his teams in general do is they are highly structured, like we talked about last time. But not only that, when it comes to offense, under Dave Haxtell, so much of the Flyers' offense was a rotation, a part of the cycle game kind of down low that was going back to the point, and then defenders were shooting on net, and then forwards are trying to deflect it in. And there's times when that works, but there are many times when that doesn't work. And so what you really would like to see from a team is a high volume of shooting from all over the place. And so the Carolina Hurricanes are the absolute kings of that. The interesting thing is, though, is the Hurricanes were good at it for probably 4 seasons without making the playoffs. So even though they were good at it, there was other aspects of their game. A lot of it was considered goaltending and a few other aspects that prevented them from making the playoffs. But if you're a Flyers team that has struggled with overall offense, this is a good sign, because even if pucks aren't going in, like I was looking at their team shooting percentage, it's the second lowest in the league, meaning that stat can only get better. So if there's, as we saw last night, right, like usually with shooting percentage, it'll climb eventually. I think the league average is closer to a 10%, and the Flyers were shooting at just over a 6. So somewhere along those lines, that's going to improve. And but under Vigneault, that's a really good sign. It means that if that shooting percentage goes up that 3% roughly that they need it to just get to league average, then they can be an offensively dominant team.
Yeah, defensively it looks good. And then, like you said, I looked at the stats this morning. I think I saw that the Flyers, have the 4th most shot attempts per game. So it's just not getting to the back of the net. Let's talk about Carter Hart, man. 89% save percentage in 5 games so far this season. It's not exactly great. However, Brian Elliott has actually played some surprisingly good hockey given the opportunity. We all know about Brian Elliott. He got his second consecutive start versus the Blackhawks last night. You look at the next 10 games, which are crazy important. The Flyers have 6 divisional games, 4 against the Atlantic. They play the Toronto Leafs twice. So they got a really tough schedule coming up, an important schedule coming up. How would you proceed behind the net? Is there a goalie controversy in Philadelphia right now? Go ahead, man.
I wouldn't say so, just because of Hart's age. When they made the decision when Chuck Fletcher made the decision to re-sign Brian Elliott, it was with this idea that he couldn't just be heavily reliant on Carter Hart for this whole season, as much as he wanted to be. I mean, goalies today anyway are playing closer to the 50-game mark than the 60-game mark. It's funny to think of when I was a kid, Martin Brodeur would play like 75 games of an 82-game schedule. So now that's completely unheard of, where I think the goalie that played the most games last year was like in the high 60s. So that is, and even then now, most teams, like say Boston Bruins, they recognize we need to give our starters a rest. So they have 2 solid goalies, Halak and Rask, and Halak might be a starter in another team in the league, and they both play or just over 40 games each, and then Rask ran with it in the playoffs. So that's more of the trend. NHL trend is to have goalies play less games anyway. So to have Elliott kind of step in at this point in the season, with young goalies, sometimes it takes a while to find your rhythm. And honestly, the mandate from Flyers ownership this year, and the reason why they fired Hextall and got rid of Hackstall was, hey, we're done with the development stage here. We're making the playoffs. And so for that reason, I think what you're going to keep seeing is Vigneault's going to go with a hot hand. And so right now, Elliott's giving them a better chance to win, it would appear. But I haven't given up on Hart either. So it's a long season. It's an 82-game season. There's going to be lots of opportunity for him to get in. We all know Brian Elliott. He's bound to have a bad game at some point soon here. And when Hart gets his chance, he could very easily take it back over. But the .890 save percentage is a little bit interesting to start the year, since he is kind of known to be a quick starter, not a slow starter. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on, but I'm not calling it a controversy yet.
Okay, what would you do, man? You're the coach. Do you ride or die with Carter Hart, give him that time to grow, or do you go with the hot hand?
I think you got to take it situationally. Like I think that there's after a losing streak like they were just on, if you're thinking playoffs of that team, I would have gone with Elliott as well. But I think if you find yourself in this sort of back and forth, like win 2, lose 1, things like that, I would throw it back to Hart, because long term he's your guy.
Awesome. Let's talk about Joel Farabee. I think he was your number 1 prospect on your big board. 19 years old, finally got the call up with the Philadelphia Flyers. In 2 games, he has an assist on 7 shots on goal. Unfortunately, 2 overturned goals last night versus the Chicago Blackhawks. From first glance, he's been active on the ice. He got his first career point last night. Dude, what is your first impressions of Joel Farabee? Go ahead, dude.
He's coming as advertised. So, I mean, it's crazy to think he's only 19 and he's able to do this. And when he was demoted, you could go a number of different ways with a demotion as a player. Sometimes younger players are demoralized and are kind of feeling like low on energy, like, oh man, like I just got demoted. I don't know what to do here. But in his case, the opposite is true. He went down and scored 4 goals in 4 games. And was absolutely dominant with the Phantoms. And so now that he's up, he has just looked like the player that we thought he would be. His scouting report, like the year he was drafted, was he was going to be a really, really good secondary scoring option with first line probability of success. So first line type of player, but he may look honestly more like a second line guy at times, because he just works well with highly skilled players. And so that came as advertised last night and the night before. I mean, some of those passes that he was pulling off at various points in time, he looks like he's an NHL player as a 19-year-old. So it wouldn't surprise me if he sticks. Again, when in the NHL, is always salary cap is an issue, and he has a high bonus structure. So if they run into some money problems, they might have to send him down. But for now, man, like I would not be surprised if he sticks. I think he's deserved it.
He looks good, man. The Flyers are now 2-0 with Joel Farabee playing. Dude, he's going to be a beast. That pass he had to Kevin Hayes. Dude, Kevin Hayes, get on sides, man. Come on. What are you doing? All right, let's move on to Michael Raffl. Dude, he's been a real surprise, I thought, this year as well. A quality fourth liner this season. But unfortunately, last night's W came with a cost. He went down with it almost looked like a broken ankle. He could barely put any weight on his right leg. Let's talk about who you think should step up in case Michael Raffl is going to miss some extended time.
If we're talking a call-up, I know that they just called up Vorobyov as well from Lehigh. And he was in the lineup the last 2 games. So if Patrick is ready, then he can go in. But if not, they're going to be looking to put a center in there because Raffl was kind of playing center here and there. So it would not surprise me if we see our friend German Rubitsov get the call up if Patrick's not ready. He's had a decent start as well. And I think that they had tried him out as a fourth line center role. So I think that makes sense. Morgan Frost could jump in as well. He's had a good start in the AHL as well, but I think they want to see him get a little bit more time in. I did hear too that they are still high. They have not given up on either Connor Bunnaman or Tornitzky, who made the team. Just obviously because of injuries and lack of offense, they made some lateral moves there. So I think that there's a chance that one of those guys could find themselves back in the lineup as well. But they seem to be open to trying all sorts of different prospects, especially if they're being successful in Lehigh. It's a fun problem to have. So Rubitsov might be the guy as well.
Cool, man. All right, let's talk one more question before we get into some prospect updates. All right, Nolan Patrick seems to be making some progress with his migraine disorder. He's back at practice. The Flyers could see him return in the near future. How do you expect Nolan Patrick to kind of change things on the Flyers offense?
I think he just gives you another strong option. I mean, he's a playmaker, a very intelligent playmaker. And so, especially with the Flyers having this plethora of highly skilled wingers and young guys like Farabee, I think that he just adds this other layer to them that perhaps would be missing. So, in terms of depth-wise now, once he's back in the lineup at center, you got Couturier, Hayes, and Patrick. That's a pretty stellar 1, 2, and 3. My concern, though, in the midst of it is Patrick isn't known as being the fastest skater in the world. He's not slow, per se. But with missing training camp and missing the beginning of the year, I just can't imagine him having a very fast start. So it could be interesting, and I would be cautioned as a Flyers fan and just take into account that it could be a good couple months before he looks like even the Nolan Patrick we saw last year, let alone take a step. So hopefully this migraine disorder picks up soon. You hate to hear stories like this. They happen too often these days, it would appear.
Awesome stuff. That is Tyson Quibell. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Quibell Tyson. All right, let's talk some Flyers prospect updates. Let's start off with Mr. Bobby Brink. Bobby is a 5'8", 18-year-old right winger. He was the 34th overall selection in the second round of last year's draft. And dude, you're 4th overall Flyers prospect. What's going on with Bobby Brink, man?
He has had an excellent start to the season. He was a player that, when I ranked him, 4th total as a Flyers prospect. And last season, I was really high on him in the first round of the draft. He was a player, though, that I was looking at and I'm saying, we're not going to see his full potential, so to speak, for a while. So he's kind of a long-term guy, especially with his height. But man, his tenacity, his will to win, his ability to carry on to the puck and cause high danger scoring chances through possession is just off the charts in so many ways. And he's shown that at Denver. At the University of Denver, they've given him a top 6 role already as a freshman, and he's got 6 points, 3 goals, 3 assists in 6 games. So that's really encouraging. I said I'd be happy if he put up just over 30 points in that league, and I think he's on pace, obviously, for significantly more than that, depending on how far they go. College players usually play around 40 games in NCAA, so he's on pace for 40 points. So I think that maybe slightly accelerates his projection a little bit, because it's showing that he has a high level of offense that he's able to transition to the next level with really well. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. Sometimes Denver gets games on ESPN and ESPN Plus. So if you ever get a chance and you see a Denver game, you want to see Mr. Brink, click on over.
Fantastic. I'm actually going to write that down so I can put that up on the Blue Root Pod, the Blue Root Twitter page. All right, next up, we got Cam York, 5'11", 18-year-old defenseman, 14th pick in the first round of last year's draft. He was your number 3 prospect. What is the update with Cam York, man?
Unfortunately, not a great one.
Yeah,
he got injured a couple weeks ago, and so Michigan's played, I believe, 4 games so far, and he has only played in their first. So he had an ankle injury of some sort, and I think it's a high ankle sprain. I read some stuff out of Ann Arbor, that some newspaper stuff this week that were saying that he it's kind of the coaches are saying, and medical staff, that he's probably close to a return, and they've kind of put it in his wheelhouse. But as a freshman, I think he also feels a little bit perhaps tepid in trying to come back. So it's a little bit of a bummer. He had in the preseason, there was a viral video of him going around on Twitter of just making these absolutely amazing moves in the offensive zone as a defenseman, where I looked at where he was on the ice and one of the goals that he scored, and I'm like, wait a minute, you look like you're a winger, not a defenseman. And that's been his MO in so many ways. He's electrifying offensively. He's so smart, so intelligent, and it's a bummer he's been injured so far. I don't think it's a long-term injury, but it's one of those ones where you're like, man, injuries early on for players, whether it's the NHL or in NCAA or in Canadian Junior, like, it's just hard to work yourself up to being game shape ready. And so he's going to be a little bit behind on that front coming back. But I think if you get a chance an opportunity to watch him, Michigan games are televised fairly regularly as well. Head on over, especially later in the year. You will notice him all the time. He's super fun to watch.
Cool, man. All right. Next up, we got Wade Allison, 6'2", 21-year-old right winger. Allison was the 52nd overall pick in the second round of the 2016 draft. Your number 8 prospect. What's the latest with Wade Allison?
He's similar to a Cam York, unfortunately. He was a guy that I had coming in this year thinking that he was going to be super dominant. He had quite a few injuries the last couple of years. He had a torn ACL, I believe, last year. And so he's rehabbed it well. Did show up to Flyers rookie camp, and he turned a lot of heads. He's affectionately considered a Scott Hartnell type. So he's big. He has no problem playing in front of the net and mixing it up a little bit, and he has a really fun personality. So he's a guy, he's in his senior year at Western Michigan, and so as a senior in NCAA, you just expect a lot. So for me this year, I was looking at him, and I'm going, you know what? I think he could get a point a game easy if he's feeling 100%. And I think he's still adjusting a little bit to some of the recovery from injury. So he only has 1 assist so far, or 1 goal. He's got 4 penalty minutes, so I guess he's doing something. But he's had a pretty slow start as well, and he's a guy that the Flyers are likely looking to sign as soon as possible when the season is over, if he wants to sign with the Flyers. There's a little bit of this weird nuance with NCAA players where if they're a senior, they don't want to sign with the team that drafted them. They just got to wait till August and they can be free agents. So Allison's a guy, though, that the Flyers are still high on and they want to get signed. And so keep an eye on him. Hopefully some of his numbers start turning around.
All right. Second to last prospect update, we've got Mikhail Vorobyov. Called up alongside Joel Farabee. He's a 6'2" center, 22 years old, drafted in the 5th round of the 2015 draft. He was your number 12 Flyers prospect on your big board. What is the update with this guy?
Man, so for him, he's a prime example of a player that is not only showing growth on the ice, but in terms of character as well. So for him especially, when he got last year, he made the Flyers. When he got sent down, he had a real hard time with Lehigh. And so this summer when he got interviewed, he talked about how he was really disappointed. He's a player that came over from Russia, and for him, to make the Flyers was a really big deal. And then to get sent back, just feeling feelings of homesickness and things like that. And just, it showed in his game. And obviously you can't measure character, right, with analytics and things like that. But for a player like him, he got sent down fairly early out of camp this year. It's a little bit surprising. And so I was beginning to wonder, as I'm sure others were, like, okay, so where does that put him then in terms of plans for him? But not only that, what does that mean for him and his own psyche if he's getting sent down again and he was so disappointed last time? But rather than just kind of sit down and in the minors and mope, instead, he used that as an opportunity to play the exact game that led to his call-up and the exact game that led to him making the Flyers last year. So he just has this steady two-way game that he plays as a highly intelligent player. He'll make these really good defensive plays and really smart, quick offensive plays that a lot of players can't make. They just may not always turn into these amazing amounts of scoring production on a stat sheet. But if you watch him very, very closely, he's a very highly intelligent guy. And so he put up 4 points in 5 games in Lehigh so far, which is really good. He was seeing strong minutes. He had good underlying numbers. And for that reason, the Flyers were like, you know what, man, we're going to call you up. And they did. He's got an assist in 2 games, and he looks like he fits long term. And he's making a case for himself to stay in that position.
Love it. Love it. All right. Last up, we got your number 2 Flyers prospect. He is Morgan Frost, 5'11", 20-year-old center. He was a 27th pick in the first round of the 2017 draft, man. What's going on with Morgan Frost?
He as well has had a good start to his AHL career. He has a goal and 3 assists for 4 points in 5 games. Sometimes he's coming from Canadian Junior in the OHL, where he put up insane numbers last year, like over 100 points in 50 games, almost a 2-point-a-game pace, I think, is roughly where he was at. And so for him to transition back or to the AHL can be a little bit difficult because in the OHL he was playing some nights almost 30 minutes a night. And so now he's on a pretty deep Phantoms team, and so you always wonder how that's going to go with players that aren't getting the same amount of ice time and not necessarily getting the same amount of chances, and looking at that and going, all right, well, how well does he play with the minutes that he has? So if he's dropping probably 10 minutes on average a night from what he's used to playing, how is that gonna affect his production? And the answer has been it hasn't really affected it. I mean, pretty much what you would project from a player of his skill level is pretty much where he's at. And so I think I said at the beginning of the year, I thought he was NHL ready. I think if he had not gotten injured in camp, I think he would have been given a bigger chance by the Flyers. And so I think if he continues to produce at this rate, they will take a look at him. If you do ever get a chance to see any Lehigh Valley games, you will notice him. He's got amazing puck skills on the power play especially. He gets power play minutes. He loves to be on the left side of the sideboards and just makes these really fun plays and really smart passes, and he's noticeable all the time. So he's a player to keep an eye on as well, and he's had an excellent start, which is it's a good thing when your top 2 prospects in both Farabee and Frost are seemingly producing and seemingly transitioning the professional game in such an easy fashion. So these are very positive signs for the Flyers going forward.
That is Tyson Quibell. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Quibell Tyson. Just looking across this, man, there's just so much young blood on the Flyers right now, whether it's Carter Hart or Vorobyov or Joel Farabee, man. It's the young talent is there through and through. Any last comments before we wrap this up, man?
I mean, just keep an eye out on this team, man. Like, I know sometimes it can be easy to during the midst of a long season, like, stop watching, but they are entertaining to watch. Super entertaining. They're 3 lines deep, a young defensive core. Travis Sanheim was ridiculous last night, had some really good plays last night. There's always something to see. So keep your eyes out. I think that they're still a bubble team, playoff team, and it's going to be a roller coaster ride, and buckle up.
Love it, man. You finally got to see Claude Giroux get on the board last night.
Yeah.
He got his first goal. Voracek has started slow, but you've kind of seen some of the young Flyers really step up, I think. You see, Travis Konechny, Sanheim you mentioned. Oscar Lindblom has had a really good start, I think. I think it's been an overall good start. Any last comments about, like, Konechny or these guys?
Man, I have been very disappointed with Voracek. I took a look at him at the beginning of the season as I was watching games and kind of realizing like, okay, are my eyes deceiving me? What am I missing? And some of the stats I was finding, especially advanced stats, if any of you are nerds, Money Puck is a helpful one to go to, or Natural Stat Trick. And some of the data that they had, especially early on with Voracek, was that the Flyers were better with him when he was on the bench than they were when he was on the ice. And so that happens early in the season, but man, it was bad. So he's seen a little improvement, but I was even checking last night, and in terms of overall game score and influence on offense and game, he was still low. Very, very low. Like, I think second lowest of all Flyers players, other than like Robert Hagg. So he's a guy that hopefully he can turn it around. If not, like, the nice thing is that he will be given time and space to figure it out, because they have so much young talent. Seven struggling one game, that's fine. Let's just move Farabee up, or let's have Konecny play closer to 20 minutes. So yeah,
Love it. A lot going on with the Blue Root Pod right now. We have the Sixers starting. Be prepared. We're going to be doing a Matisse Thybulle first impression pod very soon. We're also going to be breaking down the Delaware Blue Coats roster in the near future. Make sure you find the Blue Root Pod on iTunes and Spotify and drop those 5 stars and leave a review. Can also be found on our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit subscribe below. For Tyson, for myself, thanks for listening, guys. Stay awesome.